back to another Star Mini Gaming YouTube video. First off, I want to apologize. I'm using my older camera and mic setup. For some reason, the video recording program with my new one is not working properly at the moment. The video won't properly sync up with the audio, and it's real glitchy and jumpy. So while I try to figure that out, I've still got to use this old thing. But this video is, as promised, a brief look at the new Balance of Power book. As a shop owner, I do tend to get these kinds of things in a day or two early before they're officially released. And so I real briefly wanted to talk about, what's in it, right? Like, what you can expect. I had a few questions that were asked via the Google Plus community, which I will answer at the end. So I'll let you know before I get to those, because some of them are questions about, like, the narrative and things like that. And if you don't really want to kind of have that spoiled for you before you either have a chance to read the book or like this larger book or any of the novels that will correspond with some of these things. Some of them are already out and some of them are not. I just want to give you that chance. So first off, it is a very large book. It is 304 pages. The final 4 pages are the main rules. We've seen that repeated throughout most of the GW publications since the Age of Sigmar. Obviously, the rules are free. You can download them on their website. They're available in the starter kit. They're available in the back of the Stormcast Eternals Codex Army book, whatever you want to call it. And once again, they are at the back of the Balance of Power. So it's just another, bit of evidence that GW really wants to lower the barrier of entry for this game as much as possible. Literally, you can start anywhere and have the main rules for you, right? If for whatever reason you don't have access to a computer or a phone that can't have the app, you can get them via the starter set. If you're not interested in the armies in the starter set, you can get them through the different army books. Or if you're more interested in running campaigns and not necessarily interested in the larger army books, then boom, you have them available here in these larger campaign books. So first off, I'll just show you a couple of pictures. The artwork in this is great, as we should have come to expect from GW. There are a couple pages of this, which is basically a timeline of some events. We have different illustrations, of course, and lots of different pictures of GW models that are kind of playing out what's going on, including the new Fire Slayers. In this book, from a narrative standpoint and advancing the storyline for each of the factions, it covers quite a few. I haven't, of course, read through everything in extreme detail. I just got this today, and but I have gone through a few parts that I found kind of jumped out to me. It talks about, from a narrative perspective, the Skaven, what's going on with them. There's some really interesting stuff that I'm not gonna go into depth on any of the stories here, but there's some really interesting stuff with the Skaven. It talks about, of course, the Stormcast in a couple different places. If you followed my narrative review series at all, this will kind of summarize some of the events that have taken place in the novels between this and the Galmaraz campaign book that GW released earlier. So we follow the events of Gardas and Grimm and the Hallowed Knights. We have Vandus the Hammerhand and Ionis Cryptborn of the Hammers of Sigmar. And there's mentions of other ones like Thostus Bladestorm and the Celestial Vindicators. Those are probably the 3 largest ones that we've seen repeated. But anyways, there's some of that. There's also some story on the Lizardmen or the Seraphon, which is nice. We haven't had a whole lot of that, especially in the novels. I haven't even seen them come up yet. And I'm pretty close to caught up on every single novel that GW has written thus far for it, including the short stories. We have the advancement of Chaos. We have Archaon kind of coming into play here, and some more backstory on him. I haven't yet read The Call of Archaon. That's one of the few that I'm still behind with. It explains a bit more of the Varangard, and we see that is in fact a much larger order than we initially thought, based upon what I heard amongst the community. Who else have we got? We've got the Fire Slayers advancing their storyline. all the different chaos. There's the Skaven. Of course, the Death Faction, which is what, as soon as I saw the Death Faction stuff, is what really made me, like, I've got to get a copy of this book for myself, which there is a lot of explanation for the Death Faction. Now, it does focus mostly on Neferata, which is important because she's the only one of the three Mortarchs that we haven't followed much yet. Manfred and Arkan the Black, we already know what happened with them because of the audio drama series featuring Tarsus the Bullheart and his part of the Hallowed Knights that he commanded. And so we already know what befell them. And we know what happened in Agash. But Neferata was the one that was kind of still an unknown. Well, it talks about her story in this. And it continues the story of Nagash as well. So we know exactly what has happened with them. So, in addition, in this book, we have at the very back quite a few of the War Scrolls present. Now, you know, not all of them are like brand new. Like we have Neferata and Nagash and the Morghast. And really, in the back, there's the War Scrolls for all the different units that are important to this book. As the book goes through the storylines and all that are happening, it gives you special scenarios to kind of play out the events of the stories that it's talking about. And so at the back, it includes the War Scrolls for the units that are described in the story that you will need if you want to play those out and follow the storyline. Of course, they have, you know, the scenario set up in such a way that you could play the same idea that's happening, like if it's a siege or whatever, you can play that, but with different forces and adapt it elsewhere, of course. They have additional, you know, the battle plans, the times of war, all those kinds of things that can affect the way you play Age of Sigmar. All those are present here. There are additional War Scroll battalions at the back, and several of them are unique. If you watched Warhammer Weekly last night, then you know that, from Tom, that there are these new ones that they're doing, these new War Scroll battalions, that are taking generic characters and giving them special rules, that if you fill them in this, they basically become that named character, which is a really interesting way to do it, and I really like it, because it kind of further follows the fluff, and it really makes, if you want to take a named character like the Lord Castellant Grimm of the Hallowed Knights, who is in the realm of life, you know, trying to protect Alariel, that, you know, you kind of follow the narrative that's described if you want to play him, like, with all the bonuses that truly make him play like Grimm. So, for example, let's take a look at Grimm's Brotherhood of the Stormcast Eternals. And there is Lord Castellant Grimm. And so, this formation requires one Lord Castellant, who is Grimm, 0 to 1 Gryphounds, which, if you read the novels, he has, of course, his loyal Grimhound, 1 unit of Prosecutors, 2 units of Liberators, and 1 to 2 units chosen from any of the following combination, which is Liberators, Judicators, Retributors, Protectors, and Decimators. So, basically, you have the starter box, plus a Lord Castellant, plus a unit of, well, actually, that's it. You could do it with just the Lord Castellant and the starter box set. You could play that. And the abilities that you get are add 1 to the save rolls for Grimm, and to the save rolls of any units from this formation that are within 9 inches of him when the saving roll is made. So that's a pretty big deal because, you know, if you have your Liberators with their shields, so they're re-rolling failed wound rolls of 1, they now, outside of terrain or anything else being cast on them, like Mystic Shield, have a 3-up re-rolling 1s. So you only fail the armor save on a 2 on the initial roll. That's a pretty big deal. And then in addition, you ignore any modifiers for number of models that are slain when taking a battle shock test for a unit from this formation while they are within 9 inches of Grimm. Which again is a big deal because whenever you take your battle shock test, you normally take the number of models slain and roll a die and add them together. And if that number exceeds your bravery, then you lose a number of models equal to the amount that it exceeded your bravery. So basically, if they're within range of Grimm, without any other modifier coming in place that maybe overrides that, then they're not going to have anyone fleet ever, which is a pretty big deal. So, like I said, it's a really big book. It is a bit steep at a regular price of $75, but it is a hardback book. It is a big book. There was obviously a lot of time and effort put into this. Like I said, I haven't gone through, an exhaustive reading of it, but in just reading the 3 different segments of the lore that I did read, that's kind of, showing the developing narrative, they are very well written in terms of like, especially for a book of this kind. They were pretty quick read, a couple minutes to read each one of them, but they were really enjoyable. I really enjoyed reading them and looking through the scenarios that kind of go along with them. So I would recommend this book if you're on the fence about it. But now, here come the potential spoilers. So I'm going to let you know. So if you don't want any spoilers to the story or this, more of the specifics that's contained within this book, you want to be surprised when you get it, then go ahead and turn off the video here, because I had a few questions that I said I would address from the Google Plus community. And I do intend to continue going through this book in the next few days and at least go into a bit deeper in some of the sections, but this is just a quick general overview. So now I'm going to answer these questions. So from Vince Venturella, we have 2 questions. What happened to Ilariel and Vandus and Archaon fight? And I'm not going to go into entirely what happens to Ilariel, only because, I'm sorry Vince, only because I still have my narrative review that I want to do, and I'm reading the book right now that covers all those events. But I will say that basically at the end of the War for the Hidden Veil, which I've already covered, the Lord Celestant Gardas is killed and Lord Castellan Grim has to take over, and Ilariel leaves the Hidden Grove behind and starts a mass exodus of the Sylvaneth. And so whenever they're going, they basically come to a point where the Nurgle forces are right behind them and coming hot on their heels, and they take this hidden pathway of magic, and it's a realm it's not the warp, but it's a realm that is not one of the mortal realms. It's like a special kind of like slipstream outside of natural reality. And so they go on this and they use this to kind of fast travel to get ahead of the Chaos forces. And then as they continue on, there's another point which Ilariel has to expend a large amount of her magic, and basically in the process her body dies and she goes into this kind of like seed form, and her kind of like right hand woman, the Lady of Vines is her name, she's a Sylvaneth dryad. She basically takes the seed and carries it with her on the rest of their journey. And I don't want to spoil the rest of what happens in that story, so I'm going to have to cut it off there for now, Vince. I'm sorry. Number 2 is the Vandus Archaon fight, and I don't believe that this is in any of the novels yet. At least I haven't seen anything on it, so I'm not afraid to cover that. I won't go into super detail. It's basically a short story in and of itself in this book whenever they fight. But the long and short of it is, Vandus puts up a very heroic fight. Archaon kills him, and literally every one of Vandus' storm hosts, including Ionis Cryptborn, is killed in the battle. Now, they're Stormcast, they will come back. Of course, they'll all be reforged, but Vandus does manage to land a few blows on Archaon's mount, and he shows himself well in the fight, but he's not even close to Archaon's power, and so Archaon just destroys him. MC1 Gamer asks if Ilariel is a tree, what kind of tree would she be? The answer is, of course, a cherry tree, and I'm not going to go into details why. You can figure that out for yourself. And Stu Gibson asked, does the fluff ending of the book suggest that death will indeed be the next faction explored? And that's a tough one, because I put out recently a video on why I thought the death faction would be from a narrative perspective. We've seen thus far in the Age of Sigmar that GW will write these novels to coincide with the releases. The first books are in the Realm of Fire, and they have to do with the characters and contents of the starter box, which of course made sense, right? And then we had them move on from there and begin to introduce some other characters and all, especially as the new Stormcast hero packs were coming out. We had each one of these new heroes mentioned in a book, given a specific excuse me, given a specific name character to represent that one, so that you at least got to know something about that model that you're buying. We had the introduction of the other Chaos forces, and in the end, the most recent one that we've had in terms of like series of books that have completely come out focuses on the Death faction and the awakening of Nagash and him rising back to power. And that story does continue in this, not directly. It kind of shows what's going on at the same time, and then at the end of that story in this Balance of Power book, we kind of see the two stories concerning the Death faction kind of meet up and continue to advance. And so I would say Death may not be the very next faction, but expect them soon. If this holds true. None of the other stories that I've read thus far in this, which again is only 2 others, have the kind of cliffhanger ending to where you're really like, that was the end of it. Like, all these other stories wrap up so much better that I've read thus far, except for the Death faction. So I would say, based upon the evidence in the narrative, yes, Death faction may not be the next one, but they are coming soon. Expect, some very grand movement from Nagash's forces in the narrative very soon. And of course, models to match that to increase their sales of both. And then there were no more questions, but I wanted to add one more thing that was really interesting. Again, I'm not going to spoil which story. I did flip through all the stories in this book a little bit, and just kind of skimmed some of them. But we learn that chaos can corrupt, and we've seen that time and time again where characters in Warhammer and in 40k, which I'm more familiar with, kind of fall to chaos, right? If you're familiar with 40k, probably the most famous one is Horus himself falling to chaos and betraying the Emperor. Well, for the first time that I've seen, we've seen a reversal of that. We've had a named champion now within this book of one of the Chaos Gods repent of chaos and become a Stormcast Eternal. I'm not going to tell you who, I'm not going to tell you which one he's from. If you want to know, you can either read the book or wait till on one of my further videos down the line where once other people have had the chance to get the book, if they really want to, at the very beginning, I will reveal who and why and how. So until next time, this is James. I hope you enjoy that review, and happy gaming.